September 15 minutes, please. Councillor Reardon and Councillor Norton second. All those in favor and those opposed. Thank you, folks. Under consent agenda, we do have one item, again, 2021 general operating budget is a big deal, but we've discussed it a couple of times. It's gone to council. That's why it's in consent, and I didn't think, nor did staff think, it needed any more discussion. However, I'm going to ask for consent agenda to be moved, and if someone would like to pull it, that's fine. Can we move consent, please? Councillor Norton, seconded by Councillor Casey. Thank you. Then I'll ask for the vote. All those in favor and those opposed. Again, Councillor Sullivan, if you are opposed to any of the motions, please sing out. Otherwise, I've got you as an affirmative. Thank you.
Yeah, correct.
Thank you. Business 2021 Utility Fund Operating Budget. I believe that's Mr. McGovern. You going to help us there, Brent, please?
Yes, good evening,
Sir.
Chairman Merrithew and members of committee. I will just bear with me as I share my screen.
Absolutely.
Can you see that screen okay? Can you see that screen okay?
You're now double screen there, yes. Commissioner McGovern.
Okay. Bear with me one moment, please. For some reason, it's not allowing me to end my screen sharing here. Try it one more time.
That's, I think you've got it now.
Yeah, just keep it in that format there, Brent.
Oh, okay. Does that show the entire screen?
Yeah, we're seeing your normal PowerPoint work screen, but that's fine. It's large enough where we'll be able to follow along. Maybe you just want to make that window a bit bigger, but I don't think you need to go into screen show version at all.
Oh. Okay, try it one more time here. Are you able to see that?
Just go in that form, that's fine. Don't change anything else, away we go.
Okay, thank you. Sorry about that. So good evening. This evening I will be presenting the draft St. John Water Utility Fund operating budget. So the budget before you this evening includes all components of the utility operating budget, with the exception of the industrial raw water budgets. At next month's Finance Committee meeting on November 18th, we will present the draft industrial water budgets. And on November 23rd, the entire utility operating budget, including the industrial raw water budgets, will be presented to Council for first and third reading of the bylaw amendments. And on December 7th, the plan is to then have the budget before Council for third reading. This slide is to provide some context around the budget before you this evening. There are some challenges. Revenue continues to decline, and COVID-19 has had an impact on our metered revenue this year, and we expect it will continue to do so in 2021. On the other hand, there's a lot of good news with this operating budget. First off, there's no proposed rate increase for flat rate customers or metered customers. In fact, this budget sets the stage for rate stabilization over the next few years for a number of reasons that I will get into in subsequent slides. The 2021 proposed flat rate remains the same as it has been for the last couple of years at $1,428. Debt reduction is part of the good news. We have aggressively been paying down the utility debt associated with the Safe Clean Drinking Water project and harbor cleanup. And as noted in the report, by the end of 2021, the debt will have reduced by approximately $26 million. The 2021 capital funded from operating has increased from $2.57 million in 2020 to $4.8 million for 2021, which is great news considering the infrastructure deficit that the utility has. Also, this is the first budget to include the wage escalation policy and Local 18 outside workers agreement. This slide highlights the fact that our flat rate billings have continued to decrease. But despite that, as I mentioned, there's no rate increase. And the good news is that when you look at this plot, the decrease has slowed considerably. Now we need to start trending this line upwards. And with that, we need increased growth. And with that will flow increased revenue. On the metered consumption side of the operation, there's also no planned increase in metered rates. And similarly, on the metered side of water rates, we forecast seeing rate stabilization for all of our commercial customers. As you can see on the graph, metered consumption was impacted by COVID-19, and the metered revenue we're projecting will be further impacted next year, primarily for two reasons: COVID-19, and then also the closure of Baxter Dairies or Saputo, which will have an impact of $225,000 next year on our operating budget. This draft budget has no new debt for 2021, and we continue efforts to significantly pay down the utilities debt. As you can see on the graph, since borrowing money for the Safe Clean Drinking Water project in 2017, we've not borrowed any money, and over that time, between 2017 and what you see on the plot here of the end of 2021, so over a period of 5 years, we will have reduced the debt by 24% or approximately $26 million. Capital from operating, as I noted, is $4.8 million, but we're seeking to leverage significant money from the other levels of government with a goal to completing a capital program in the order of $10 million. There is significant infrastructure deficit that remains, which is approximately $300 million. And that is largely in our linear assets or underground piping that has reached the end of its life. And that's where we're seeking funding from other levels of government to address that infrastructure deficit. As you can see, we've significantly reduced salary in the utility by over $1 million from last year's budget. This equates to approximate reduction of 10% of the workforce in 1 year. We have also been the beneficiary of lower market interest rates that has resulted in a cost reduction on our budget. We have a number of initiatives planned for 2021. We're planning to undertake and complete a 10-year long-term financial plan. We're working to bring programs in-house. Our unidirectional flushing program, we've begun to bring that in-house this year, and we'll continue that transition next year. We'll focus more on securing funding from other levels of government. As I mentioned, we'll expand our leak detection strategies to tighten all of our water system, and we'll have a fire hydrant inspection and painting program underway, and commence the planned valve exercising program. We're also making some significant investments with the replacement of biofilter at the Eastern Wastewater Treatment Facility. That was a new facility commissioned as part of harbor cleanup. We're also planning to acquire a trailer for trenchless repairs that will allow us to make the fleet more versatile and allow for further reductions in the fleet. We have an ongoing program of cleaning and inspecting the water storage tanks that will continue. And as part of the asset management plan, we'll continue the inspection of and flushing of another 65 kilometers of the sewer infrastructure. So to stabilize rates and to address the infrastructure deficit, we're tackling the fiscal challenge from all angles, holding or lowering the cost, a lot of costs, including wage freezes, staffing reductions, continuous improvement projects, and optimizing operational costs. We're continuing to look for savings and continuous improvement initiatives. We're not borrowing for capital work. We're attacking the infrastructure deficit by focusing on asset replacement or repairs as opposed to new assets. We're seeking to leverage every dollar to get the maximum benefit for ratepayers. We'll be planning to tender projects early again next spring. And as part of the asset management program where it makes sense, we're seeking to extend the life of assets by lining pipes as opposed to replacing them, or doing trenching repairs as opposed to also replacing. And we're enhancing, as I've noted, our preventative maintenance program. And we're focusing on increasing capital from operating as debt retires. But we do need to continue to infill vacant lots and generate new revenue, as I noted, so that we will have less pressure on rates in the future, and have more flexibility to invest in those assets. We're also looking for and pursuing revenue opportunities, and we're with this budget, we are it would set or establish an operating reserve to stabilize rates. And this is the first utility budget to include $625,000 in funding for an operating reserve to mitigate impacts of COVID-19 and any unforeseen financial events. There's a loss of revenue. The loss of revenue has had a negative impact on our operation. And just to give you a sense, Saputo, just losing that equates to 157.5 flat rate accounts. So rate stability is achievable due to wage escalation policy and 0% increases for management and local 18, as well as because of the staffing reductions. And staff will continue to identify cost savings and alternative sources of revenue. And the plan is to return to the Finance Committee on November 18th with a draft industrial water budget and the entire utility operating fund for first and second reading on November 23rd. And with that, it is recommended Finance Committee approve the 2021 utility fund operating budget as presented and submitted to Council for receive and file once the industrial water budgets have been approved by the Finance Committee. Thank you, Chairman. I will stop sharing.
Thank you for doing that. Yeah, no, Commissioner McGovern, great budget, really. No flat rate increase. Thank you very much. That's very close to my heart. Debt reduction, capital from operating moving from 2.2 million and change to $4.8 million. Some hard work again. Still a road in front of us with $300 million of infrastructure deficit, but great job this year. Thank you. Committee, any questions, comments, please?
Mr. Chair.
I don't see any hands. We do have a recommendation. I'm sorry, sir?
Sorry, just Councillor Sullivan.
Councillor Sullivan, please go ahead. Go ahead, please, Gary.
Thanks for that report, Commissioner. Certainly everything that the chair has just said are all the financial policies that we are trying to establish organization-wide. Included on top of those is increasing a reserve, I think I heard. Just for comparators, was the reserve confirmed for me about $600,000?
Yes, that is correct.
Okay, so
625, sorry to be exact.
Thank you. So for comparator's sake, if we said, well, we didn't want to establish a reserve, and I'm not arguing against it, I'm just trying to get it in my mind, and instead chose to do a reduction on the flat rates, what would that equivalent to?
And I know Craig Levine, who's on here, may be best positioned to handle that from a financial perspective. Craig, are you able to provide some perspective on the approximation of that?
Hi, Brent. Yes, so that would equal probably around $12 to $13 on the flat rate.
Okay, thank you.
Mr. Chairman?
Yes, sir. Go ahead, Mayor Don.
Thanks for the presentation. I hopefully thousands are watching tonight. I mean, I just reflecting a little bit on yourself versus Mr. Yamin when it comes to our climate change initiatives. But all joking aside, a utility that is you're just doing an amazing job with your team. I think the theme amongst almost every conversation we have is do better, get better, invest wisely, better reserves, deal with our big and aged infrastructure. As you know, we've invested. You just finished, you and your team, Brent, the largest infrastructure project in the province's history. On under budget, incredible performance. But you've also highlighted some pressure there for us, and I think where Councillor Sullivan was going, and I hesitate to even bring it up, but I think we need to continue to you highlighted with the vacant lots, with density, with infill, getting more users on the system that we have, and our municipality, which sometimes gets kicked around a little bit, has made these investments. Harbor cleanup, safe, clean drinking water. We're well positioned. We would be one of the leading cities or communities in Atlantic Canada when it comes to this clean, safe drinking water. We have capacity. We have infill lots, and your growth committee colleagues would be talking about and will be talking about affordable housing and affordability and increased supply. So it's all interwoven, I guess. And I just, it'll be interesting for us to continue to work with you, Commissioner, the growth committee, the strategic planning exercise, to look at that sensitivity of the cost of our product and the need for ongoing continuous improvement, driving our costs down. We know how some people feel about meters and fairness and equity within the system. So anyway, just to say thank you. I think you're doing a fantastic job in managing this utility. You've given us a couple of warning signs here tonight and how critically important growth is to get more users onto the system, and that very close relationship between cost sensitivity and getting more users. But anyway, just thank you for all the hard work, And I don't think it ends. I think we need to continue to, I think the message you've delivered tonight is you're not letting up, and you know what your task is, and you're going to continue to drive innovation and performance and value for money. And I thank you for it.
Thank you, Your Worship. Also, thanks goes out, as you say, to the team, and in particular, Kendall Mason and Craig Levine, who are both on this evening.
Thank you.
All right. Well said, Mayor Darling. Thank you very much. Again, there is a recommendation in the kit. Would someone move it for me? Moved by the mayor and seconded by Mr. Casey. Councillor Casey, all those in favor? And those opposed? I see no opposition. Motion carried. Thank you. Good work, team. Thank you. Next, we have 3.2, Transit Operations Audit. Who's going to speak to that for us? Commissioner Fudge, thank you, sir.
Thank you, Chairman Marathew. If I could do a quick introduction, please.
Absolutely.
As the committee is familiar with, the city manager's sustainability plan included a review or an operational audit of the St. John Transit, business of St. John Transit. And with that, a committee was established to oversee that audit. The audit was done by a company named Stantec. And this evening, we have Stephanie Rackley-Roach, who's going to provide a high-level overview of the recommendations within that audit. Stephanie was the project manager for the audit, of the Stantec audit, overseeing the Stantec audit. We also have on the call here today, Mark Dion, who's the general manager of St. John Transit. We have Ms. Trish Ellsworth, who's the chair of the St. John Transit Commission. Also notable, Councillor Reardon was also on this committee as being a member of the Transit Commission. And I just wanted to highlight this, I guess, one important factor. Really, the Finance Committee really is getting a sneak peek, per se, of the overall high-level recommendations, more of a preview. It should be noted that St. John Transit Commission themselves have not finished their review or been fully briefed on all the details of the Stantec report and audit, and that's coming I think tomorrow or in the coming days. So the intention is to release the Stantec results and report to the public with all the accompanying recommendations after St. John Transit Commission completes the review and the review of all the recommendations of the report. So we will not be releasing the full report tonight. It will be released subsequent to St. John Transit Commission's review. I just wanted to bring that to the Finance Committee's attention. So with that, I will turn over the floor to Ms. Rackley-Roach to provide the presentation.
Good evening. Before I begin, can I just confirm that the presentation is showing properly?
Looks good.
Thank you. Members of the committee, Finance Committee, as part of the city's sustainability efforts to address the city's projected 10 million budget deficit in 2021 and 2022, operating cost reductions and revenue generation options are being evaluated across all service areas, including those of the city's agencies, boards, and commissions. One of the options being considered is a decrease to the subsidy provided to St. John Transit to run operations. This presentation outlines the findings and recommendations of Stantec, an independent consultant engaged to create an audit of the transit service. While a more efficient delivery of service was a desired outcome of the audit, the review was an opportunity to take an holistic view of operations to ensure a sustainable transit service in the long term. A request for proposals was issued on November 26, 2019 to engage a consultant to complete an operational audit of St. John Transit service offerings and operations to achieve efficiencies and savings. Specific work included in the RFP included develop a vision and principles for redesign using results from engagement efforts and existing condition analysis and in coordination with the project team. complete routing analysis and develop recommended routing options that ensures timely service on main routes and to priority neighborhoods. Evaluate other service offerings of St. John Transit, including but not limited to Comex, Handy Bus, Charter Bus, and City Tours to identify changes that ensure cost effectiveness. Evaluate internal operations that support the delivery of public-facing services. Evaluate the benefit and cost related to transitioning the St. John Transit Commission into a service area within the city's corporate structure, and to provide recommendations inclusive of all potential impacts for routing, service changes, operations, and structures that incorporate public feedback as appropriate, along with the timeline for implementation in a public communications plan to meet budget objectives for 2021 and 2022, but also include of any provisions to grow a sustainable transit service long term. The RFP closed on December 19, 2019 with 6 responses. Each were evaluated based on technical and financial submission. And the proposal submitted by Stantec was ranked highest based on the evaluation criteria by the team and met all the requirements set forth in the RFP. To guide the engagement process, the steering committee was created. The steering committee was made up of transit board commission members and employees with knowledge of transit operations. The committee was complemented with city staff that provided expertise on finance, community planning, and transportation, all areas that should be integrated in a holistic review of a sustainable transit service. The role of the steering committee was to provide coordination among the stakeholders, ensure a singular vision and mandate to the audit, ensure responsiveness to requests for input and data and feedback, and demonstrate a commitment to the project. A project management team of experienced staff was created to manage the project. The team successfully worked with Stantec to ensure the deliverables outlined in the proposal were addressed and was delivered both on time and within budget. Working through the 9 deliverables outlined in Stantec's proposal, Stantec addressed the board requirements. The end product provided the commission and the city a roadmap to deliver a more efficient service in the short term, with guidance on how to ensure transit grows to meet the evolving needs of St. John. This includes recommendations on where investments need to be made to collect the data required to make evidence-based decisions and attract ridership. The engagement had several challenges. Like many transit organizations undertaking a similar type review, and this is what we learned through the process, is that most have limited data when they start to provide clear evidence-based decisions. Addressing pandemic needs in the short term requires a transitional plan to be implemented to fully realize the benefits of implementing Stantec's recommendations. And while there was considerable collaboration between the project steering committee and Stantec throughout the engagement, not having local knowledge of St. John or the ability to travel to St. John due to COVID-19 to gain a better understanding of current operations, a lot of the conclusions provided by Stantec are based on best practices. It is important to note the scope of work completed by Stantec did not include adjustments for providing transit during the global pandemic, which is COVID-19. All data provided to Stantec on ridership, performance, current routing, and financials were all pre-pandemic. The audit continued to focus on the long-term sustainability of the transit service as outlined in the RFP. As a result, the St. John Transit Commission will need to further review the recommendations set forth in Stantec's report to deliver a transitional plan, one that outlines a transition from delivering service during the pandemic with a longer view of delivering a safe, reliable, and efficient transit service. A key deliverable of the audit was to develop a vision and objectives. The intention of the vision and objectives was to guide the development of recommendations in the short term and support long-term decision-making to ensure that sustainable service. The vision is keep St. John connected. Transit provides a safe, reliable, affordable, and customer-focused service that contributes to growth, advances sustainability goals, and encourages everyone to choose transit. The vision will be achieved through focusing on creating an accessible service, fostering sustainability and economic prosperity, increasing brand and service awareness, and optimizing return on investment. Stantec provided a wide-ranging view of St. John's transit service and related offerings. Again, the review was limited by data availability and did not include COVID-19 considerations. The analysis can be broken down into system design and internal operations, with the aspects of enabling services reviewed. Through analysis of the data provided on ridership, performance, desired travel destinations, and public engagement, Stantec proposed a network that includes areas for service enhancements, consolidation and rationalization for more direct routing, improved travel times, and consistent headways. The routing analysis on leveraging transit best practices to offer service to the greatest number of residents, particularly residents that rely on the service. St. John Transit is continuing to review the proposed network to determine the financial impact of implementation, with the likelihood that service will continue to be delivered during the pandemic at the start of 2021. It is important to understand those impacts. As part of the route analysis, Stantec has introduced an on-demand service delivery model. So in general terms, this alternative service delivery method provides service on request from home to stop or home to hub. From there, the rider can access fixed routes to travel to their intended destination. This service has been implemented in other municipalities to complement fixed route service. Considerable analysis and planning is required by St. John Transit to define where and when this service would be available and its feasibility. Stantec has outlined 17 recommendations for St. John Transit's consideration to reduce costs and ensure long-term service sustainability. Recommendations are divided into short-term actions and long-term actions. With respect to the short-term actions on service planning, Stantec is recommending that St. John Transit make route revisions as per their preferred network, utilizing the current methods to book paratransit and on-request trips. They're also recommending to transition from 3 to 2 COMEX routes. So with respect to COMEX, that will require discussions with the communities it serves, with the view that St. John is not subsidizing that service offering in any way. To begin or continue collecting a key number of performance indicators and ramp up evaluation efforts to continuously improve service delivery and create efficiencies. With respect to administration and organizational structure, a key recommendation to create a performance-based agreement with paratransit service that outlines rules, responsibilities, and reporting requirements inclusive of KPIs to inform service-based planning decisions. The agreement should also include on-demand service offerings. In the short term, roles and responsibilities within the St. John Transit organization need to be reviewed and adjusted to support efficient operations. Stantec noticed that based on their experience, St. John Transit is very lean with limited resources. Adjustment in the organizational structure are intended to concentrate on balancing workload and focus on priorities. If funds are available, Stantec has noted a need to invest in transit expertise related to marketing and customer service, planning and development, and finance. With respect to operations, Stantec is recommending St. John Transit shift bus stop infrastructure and accessibility amenities to align with the proposed routes and to simplify the fare structure. Longer-term recommendations include implementing enhancements to the transit network as outlined in the report. With respect to administration and organizational structure, they recommend rebranding Handybus service to de-emphasize the exclusivity of the service and expansion to include on-demand service. Expanding charter and ferry tour businesses to proactively focus on revenue generating that will help to support fixed route service delivery. This recommendation should be implemented only as appropriate, ensuring that any revenue can be invested into enhancements for fixed routing. In relation to scheduling, planning, and dispatch, Stantec recommends investing in scheduling and dispatch, as well as customer information software to exploit operational efficiencies. This investment will need to be incorporated into the city's long-term capital planning. There are a number of recommendations related to operations. They include investing in a fare collection system to reduce operational costs and improve customer service. An electronic system is recommended with options for those that do not have access to technology. Further simplify the fare structure to consolidate fare products. St. John Transit should be receptive to potential partnerships with other levels of government and nonprofit organizations who are willing to fund low-income fare products. Deliver a fare evasion program and plan and enforce it. Once data is available and perceived fare evasion can be quantified, St. John Transit will need to determine the benefit investing time and resources into a fare evasion plan. Improve bus stop infrastructure and customer comfort and accessibility amenities. This will also need to be considered in long-term capital planning. And bolster public marketing efforts to address a number of the objectives set for St. John Transit, particularly as it relates to growth and sustainability. Finally, with respect to operating, maintenance, and the storage facility, Stantec is recommending that St. John Transit undertake a thorough review of its fleet and redesign and expand the facility for office layout to create efficiencies. Based on a high-level financial analysis, Stantec has estimated savings in the order of magnitude of $850,000. Further due diligence, St. John Transit is required to confirm those savings. Again, it is important to note that these estimates from Stantec do not take into account COVID-19 impacts on service delivery. Considerable review and due diligence of the Stantec report is required to develop an implementation plan that provides a transition from delivering service during a pandemic to longer-term service improvements and ensuring service sustainability. Once the plan has been developed, a communications plan will be created and delivered to inform the public on service, improvements, and changes. Short-term actions will include working with the city's finance team to incorporate recommended investments into the long-term capital plan. The Stantec St. John Transit operational audit final report will be made available to the public once the commission has been reviewed. The commission will release the audit report within the coming weeks. The recommendation is to receive and file this presentation, and I would be happy to answer any questions as well as anyone that was on the steering committee.
All right. Thank you, Ms. Rackley Roach. If you'll take your screen down, please, I'll ask if there's any questions or comments. I recognize it, and thank you. This is we're getting a sneak peek at this thing. I recognize the commission and council hasn't had a look at this yet. There's lots to digest. I again, under your page, next steps, continued review and due diligence, and certainly we should highlight that. First time we're seeing it tonight, so lots to digest. With that, any questions, concerns, please? I don't see any hands. So we do have a receive and file there, and lots of work ahead of us to digest this document. Receive and file, move it please. Thank you, Councillor Reardon. Councillor Casey seconded. All those in favor? And those opposed. Thank you so much, folks. Moving on. Mr. Fogan, you going to help us with 3.3, risk management, please?
I can, Chair. Yep. 1 second. Thank you.
Sorry, Mr. Chairman. Is that perhaps is that not assessment based 3.3? Or I've got the wrong agenda, perhaps.
I've got 3.3 is hang on a second. I'm looking at my hard copy, Mayor. Do I have something wrong here?
No, excuse me, Mr. Chair. Actually, the agenda is for the assessment-based presentation to occur now, and the risk management presentation would occur next.
You flipped it on my hard copy. I apologize, folks. We will do assessment based first. Thank you kindly, Kevin.
My apologies.
No. So assessment based.
Just going to see if I can get this slide deck up.
Thank you kindly, Commissioner.
Does everybody see the slide?
Yes, sir.
Yes? Okay, thank you. So good evening, Chairman Merrithew, members of the Finance Committee. As you're aware, the province recently released its annual municipal assessment base for tax purposes on October 6, for which everyone on this committee is aware the city achieved a 0.12% tax base increase. And it's the basis that tax base increase has been integrated into the draft 2021 general operating budget for which you've approved earlier this evening to send to Common Council for approval. So those results have been reflected in that budget. I guess before I start, it's no secret that COVID-19 has had a significant impact on the assessment base, not only in St. John, but in municipalities all across New Brunswick. Notwithstanding COVID-19, many questions have been asked when comparing St. John's tax base to other benchmark cities. Questions such as, why is St. John tax base higher given the hot residential housing market currently experienced, as well as our awareness of a number of other high-profile development projects that are currently underway. So the City of St. John team, members of the Finance Department, members of the Growth Department, did meet with Service New Brunswick to obtain some responses or some information. Remind the committee and the public, Service New Brunswick is the provincial agency responsible for all property assessments in Brunswick. So the City of St. John itself or staff itself does not assess properties for purposes of property taxation. So really the purpose of this presentation is twofold. One, to provide the committee those benchmarks for 2021 in terms of our tax base compared to other cities, as well as second, share the information we received from Service New Brunswick. And that meeting occurred on October 16th. So this slide shows the overall 2021 tax base results for the City of St. John, in addition to the cities we typically compare ourselves to in the province of New Brunswick, Fredericton, Moncton, Quispamsis, Rothesay, and Grand Bay. And you'll notice that overall, as I indicated, St. John's tax base increase for tax purposes was approximately $8.2 million, which is 0.12% increase in the tax base. If you want us to calculate what that means in terms of revenue or new revenues for the City of St. John in 2021, that would equate to approximately $147,000 of new tax revenue in 2021. I will highlight that, and if you can keep these, I know I'm throwing a lot of data at you, but I'm going to compare as we go through each of these comparables last year results. So you can see the slowdown in growth for each of these communities. So if you recall, in 2020, the City of St. John's tax base growth was 1.83%. So compared to 0.12%, that's a slowdown in growth of 1.71%. So just keep that as perspective. When you look at Fredericton, although you see that their tax base has grown by 165 million, and that's 2.18%, when you actually compare what their tax base was in 2020, Fredericton's tax base growth in 2020 was 4.09%. So they have seen their growth slow in 2021 by 1.91%, which is higher than, I guess, the growth, the slowdown in growth that we're seeing in St. John. Moncton also experienced approximately $150 million in new tax base, which is 1.72% increase over their previous assessment base. But last year, their tax base grew at 4.07%. Their year-over-year impact and slowdown in growth was actually 2.35% when you take the two deltas. So you can see that although you're seeing much higher tax base growth in our comparable cities, especially the three big urban cities, that the actual impact of COVID on what the results were last year is quite severe. Quispamsis has seen a $50 million increase in their tax base, or 2.78%, which is down only slightly to their previous year growth in 2020 of 3.02%. Rothesay's tax base was only slightly higher than 2020, arriving at 3.09% compared to 2.8% last year. And Grand Bay Westfield is quite consistent actually with last year's tax base. You're seeing 1.69% on the slide. Their previous year tax base was 1.79% growth. So we thought it was also important to segment tax base for the Finance Committee with respect to separating residential and non-residential. And St. John residential tax base growth in 2021 was $31.8 million, which is 0.74%. That breaks down into, that $31.8 million is broken down into new construction, which is approximately 53% of that figure. So new construction was $17 million in the residential segment. And the rest of that figure represents just general assessment increases. Fredericton and Moncton saw a significant tax base increase in the residential base, 3.84%, or $203 million in Fredericton, and 2.73%, or $155 million in Moncton. Again, Quispam-Cis had $52.8 million in new residential tax base that represents 3.13%. Rossay at $43.2 million at 3.58%. We did request from Service New Brunswick some project details for each of these cities so we can understand really what projects were driving their residential tax base growth. However, it's their policy to not share the details about one municipality to another as a courtesy to each municipality, really leaving it up to the municipalities, easy for me to say, to decide whether they would like to share that information with each other. They also indicated that they haven't really had a chance to connect with each city on the details. So they would rather, and they're planning to do that over the next few weeks, so they'd rather not share that information with St. John until that's occurred as well. So we will seek further information from the other cities if we can obtain better line of sight on these growth figures. So this slide is the non-residential component of the tax base for 2021, where you will see obviously where the COVID-19 impacts are being felt for each community. It's worth noting that a reduction in the non-residential tax base, this is very important, is actually more severe than a reduction in the residential tax base, because you'll recall from a revenue perspective, assessments for non-residential are multiplied by 1.5 with respect to calculating the property tax revenue. So it is a bit more severe when it comes to assessment for non-residential changes as it relates to municipal property tax revenue. So St. John experienced a $23 million decline in the non-residential tax base, primarily associated with COVID-19. We'll talk about that a little later in the next few slides. You can see on this slide that every municipality pretty much saw a decrease in their non-residential tax base, primarily for the same reasons. St. John's percentage decline is, I guess, the second lowest in terms of 0.83 compared to all other benchmarks with the exception of Moncton. However, as I mentioned earlier with Moncton, even though you're seeing a smaller percentage decline, given they had a much higher growth factor in the previous year, they still had the most severe impact when it came to COVID-19 adjustments to the tax base. And over the last 5 years, I thought this was interesting for the committee to see when you compare St. John to the other communities over 5 years. St. John's tax base growth has increased approximately $291 million, or 4.3%. Moncton's tax base over the last 5 years is $781 million, or 9.66%. Fredericton, $590 million at 8.4%, followed by Quispam-Cis at $167 million for 9.91%. Rossay at $100 million at 9.11%, and $18 million at 4.74% for Grand Bay Westfield. So the meeting that occurred on October 16th that we met with Service New Brunswick. Lisa Dion is the Executive Director of Service New Brunswick. She, as well as her team, have been very cooperative with the city and accommodating with respect to their time and helping us understand our results, tax-based results. And I will make an attempt to share with the committee the information we received. Again, I don't proclaim to be a tax-based expert or assessment expert, but I'll do my best to try to communicate what we heard. So Service New Brunswick's mandate is in accordance with an Assessment Act and is to provide an assessment of the real and true market value as of January 1st of each taxation year. And it's important to note that there's often confusion between what we mean by market value and market price or sales price. They're two very different things. They look at market value, which is an estimated value of a property within a projected period of time. And they look at that and they deem it whether that value is reasonable. So market value is based on a current average of a typical buyer for a property in that area. The property is valued based on a number of different approaches depending on the property. There's a cost approach, an income approach, a sales approach, and it really depends on the property. So they really look at it over a period of time to see whether it reflects the true value of a particular area. Market price is simply the price paid for a property at any point in time. So although market prices are a factor in establishing market value, there are other factors that are taken into consideration through best practice property assessment standards that contribute to a property's overall assessment value or deemed market value for tax purposes. It's interesting to look at the 2021 property assessment information holistically from the province's point of view. Notably that there are 470,000 properties that are assessed within 340 taxing authorities, representing cities, towns, villages, and local service districts. It represents a total tax base for the province of $67.2 million. And provincially, all tax bases increased at $1.1 billion or 1.6% over 2020, with $920 million being new construction. You'll see on this graph, in terms of the overall COVID impact on the province, you'll see that in 2020, provincially, there was a 2.73% increase in tax base, and we are at 1.63 in 2021, obviously reflecting COVID. If COVID had not occurred, the pre-COVID property tax increase percentage would have been 2.26. The other thing you'll notice on this slide in 2018 is there was an assessment freeze in 2018. That's why you're seeing a very small tax base increase in 2018. There would have been a catch-up period in 2019 that would have occurred in the results. So in terms of key dates with respect to their assessment practices, first of all, September 4th is the absolute cutoff date for Service New Brunswick to have everything in their system. June 30th was the date for which they reviewed permits up to that date. They picked up permits up to June 30th that were recorded for consideration for 2021. They would also have looked at past the point of June 30th. They would have done some inspections to see whether the months of July or August merited any change from their initial review or assessment. And then finally, assessors would visit as close as possible to the cutoff date to make sure nothing was mixed. The analysis of the housing market would have been as a result of looking at an adjustment or market adjustment as of June 1st, 2020. So they would look at what the market looked like or reflected as of June 1st, 2020 for the residential housing market, which is also the date for which Service New Brunswick would have set their adjustment factor for the 2021 assessment period. In terms of COVID-19 and the sectors that were really impacted, you'll see on this slide the hospitality sector, office complexes, shopping centers, restaurants, fast food outlets, airports. They were all significantly impacted by COVID-19 with respect to the assessment. And of course, this is not just in New Brunswick, this is around the world. Multiple operations and businesses were obviously shut down in mid-March of 2020. And because of that, obviously there's a big demand for reviews of properties, and Service New Brunswick extended the request for review period from 30 to 60 days because of COVID-19. So as a result of COVID-19, there was actually a 50% rise in requests for reviews than they typically would have. And they're continuing to gather information on those properties that would be deemed to have been impacted by COVID-19. But you'll see that on this slide, we indicate that there has been a high-level adjustment done in each community. So for St. John, the impact in St. John for COVID-19 was a $49 million downward adjustment in assessment. So if you equate that into property tax revenue, that's approximately about $1.3 million. So properties that were impacted by COVID-19 did not receive their typical notice in October. They're still being reviewed. Service New Brunswick is still gathering information on these properties. But if they had to maintain the pre-COVID values on these properties, it would have forced an unmanageable quantity of appeals. And so an adjustment for COVID was required holistically in order to prevent that from occurring. So what they've done is they engaged the services of an international property institution to provide expertise to estimate what the value of those COVID-19 impacts were. An adjustment was made in each of the community's tax base for 2021. And those adjustments will be compared to the actual January 1, 2021 reviews once that's complete. So this slide really just shows the assessment base in 2020 for our benchmark communities. So the gray bar is 2020. The orange bar is pre-COVID assessments, and the lighter gray bar is the post-COVID assessments. And you'll see this really correlates with information I've already spoken to with respect to the changes in each community. So building permit versus assessment. New Brunswick can only assess what has been constructed, regardless of the building permit values. There at least needs to be a foundation for them to assess, to put into a tax base. So this year, what we're really seeing in St. John's tax base on big developments is really a timing issue. We should see a number of these big developments come to fruition in terms of tax base next year or in the coming years. In particular, with respect to the fact that the cutoff was June for new construction by Service New Brunswick. And just to give an example of comparison of building values as of October 1st, in St. John, there was about $66 million of building permit value as of October 1st. Moncton was showing $144 million in building permits as of October 1st, 2020, and Fredericton at about $106 million in building permit value. So in terms of St. John's non-residential assessment, one of the things that has been completed is a review of non-residential vacant land. That vacant land revaluation was completed and it resulted in an $18 million adjustment increase in the city of St. John. There was also a number of changes in, pulp and paper valuations. So there was a reinspection of those properties. That resulted in a $10.6 million increase in assessment for the pulp and paper mills. Overall, JDI increases with their other properties and just other, appreciation of properties is approximately 15% from 96 million to 110 million. And then in terms of those notable properties that we are hearing about in St. John, and when I refer to timing, there's the Gothic Arches project that's happening here in St. John. That's only been 7% assessed in 2021. The Telegraph building, again, only 7% assessed for 2021. The Sonia Court, the Rocca building foundation is in, but it's only been assessed at 10% as of the date of their cutoff. Wellington Row permit was 8 million, but nothing has come in after July 1st in terms of actual construction to value. There was some information in CBC article about the $200 million Port Authority development, but only $125,000 worth of permits has been established as of September 15th. So really, I think what we're seeing in terms of our expectations is a lot of timing, that these properties haven't been fully constructed yet. And this last slide is really the municipal statistics for the year for the city of St. John. I've really gone through most of it on here. Of note, 17.1 million of new construction, 1 million of non-residential new construction, and I believe everything else on this slide is I've already addressed. So, with that overall conclusion, I would say from our discussions with Service New Brunswick is one, timing is playing a very significant factor in what our expectations were for assessment growth and what they actually were and what we achieved. Second, COVID-19 is having a big impact on our non-residential tax base, and very severe when you factor into 1.5 factor or percent or multiplier when it comes to non-residential. And we continue to monitor and converse with Service New Brunswick to get further line of sight on our properties and obtaining more information on our property assessments in St. John. So with that, I will do my best to try to answer any questions the committee has.
Thank you, Commissioner Fudge. Remind everyone, Commissioner Fudge is the messenger here, and he brings this from Service New Brunswick, and he will try to answer any questions you pose to him. So open up questions, comments, please. I see Mayor Darling first. Thank you.
Thank you. Not for you. Thanks for all the work, Kevin. I guess I just, it's a couple of things for me. I guess I could boil over in frustration more so. Just, I think what we hear as elected officials, I don't want to, my colleagues can speak for themselves. I think what I hear from people, and if we could just agree for a moment that this council has put a tremendous effort, supported by staff, behind this concept called taxation fairness, and calling for, I think what this speaks to is the need for comprehensive tax reform. You have a city that is more than 20% of GDP in the province. We were the largest tax base in 2000. We're the third largest tax base. The suburban, if we're in this together as a region, we're not even holding a candle to the growth in the communities just 5 minutes or 10 minutes away. What I hear is citizens are very skeptical. It's very complex. I think you've done a good job of outlining that today. It's very concerning. It's not sustainable. There's huge regional gaps. I had someone who prefers to remain nameless send me a whole bunch of specific examples. Buildings selling for $5 million, assessed for $2 million. So there's huge gaps, huge disparity in this system. And when you look at your longer term comparison, Kevin, between ourselves and the other communities across the province of New Brunswick, we're just falling further behind and further behind, despite record growth and record number of buildings in the pipeline. You've explained some of that as timing. So I guess for me, the need for comprehensive tax reform and confidence in the system has never been greater. We have a premier with a majority government now. We have more ministers per capita than anyone else around. It's time for action on these files. We have to have confidence in the tax system. And I don't believe that exists today. It doesn't exist for me as an elected official, and it doesn't exist within most taxpayers that I speak to. Again, I'm repeating myself: record sales, record prices, huge gaps in assessment values. And if we're going to move forward as a region, one great big strong region of Greater St. John, these issues have to be addressed. I'll get off my soapbox. I'm frustrated. We can't sustain ourselves, and I know people want us to turn the corner and talk about all sunflowers and roses and everything beautiful and shiny and rosy. If this doesn't get fixed, we're going to continue the same conversation year after year after year. So I don't know what else to say. I'll stop there.
Any other questions, comments? Councillor Reardon?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I would have to agree wholeheartedly with the mayor. This doesn't offer me any clarity, I guess, the report from SNB in regards to all this. I don't know how they get their numbers. Tax reform, absolutely. We need some sort of a firm mathematical equation that we can count on and rely on, and we know what it is. If it's square footage on the front of your building, or frontage, if it's square footage, if it's whatever it is, we need something that we can count on. Can't count on this. And when I've done a few interviews with Bob Jones in regards to this, and time after time, we'll see that very similar buildings with exactly the same use are undervalued based on what their value or assessed value is in another city. So it's not new to us. In fact, my own mother texted me from Halifax and she said, "What's going on in St. John?" She told me all about the tax growth in Moncton and Fredericton. And I said, well, Mom, we're going to have a meeting and going to get that organized, figure out what's going on. And she says, no excuse is acceptable. And she's right. No excuse is acceptable. And I sort of feel like that's what I've been given here by them. I don't see how we can go forward if there's a bias for St. John that undervalues what we have here. So tax reform, absolutely. Thank you.
All right, thank you, Councillor Reardon. There's going to be a vacancy in Ward 4. Does Mom want to come up and run?
I'll check.
Thank you. Any other comments?
Mr. Chair?
Yes, sir. Councillor Sullivan, thank you.
Thanks. I might as well pile on. This was a huge shock to me. I mean, COVID notwithstanding, all we have seen in the media over the last few months is record home sales in St. John, record home prices in St. John. We got cranes in the air, and despite COVID, positive vibes. So I certainly understand and accept part of the commercial decrease. It's definitely been hard on businesses. But every other indicator that is not Service New Brunswick's indicator, apparently, is that residential assessment has significantly increased in the city of St. John. You can't have record numbers of sales, record sales prices, and all these cranes and building and end up with less than 1%. That, logically, that doesn't make sense. And I really appreciate our chief financial officer taking us through the explanation and repeating what Service New Brunswick educated him on. But it doesn't make sense. It's not logical. Something is wrong. If there's an indication that the system is broken, that property tax is the wrong way to tax, it is the situation we're looking at this year. I think I've always had a feeling that St. John's been undervalued, and we've been running on a treadmill that's tilted uphill. But I don't understand. I don't understand it. Cranes in the air. All the articles have been positive. The information that's come out of the St. John Real Estate Board has been positive. And then to have the residential portion of this be as small as it is, it just doesn't make sense.
All right. Thank you, Councillor Sullivan. Any other questions, comments? I'll finish up then. I think we can feel the frustration of Finance Committee, and I think that's echoed by Council in general. It's frustrating. I would like to know, Commissioner Fudge, if it's possible, perhaps, to get Service New Brunswick to give us a presentation to Council, not to Finance, to Council. You'd like to get inside the sausage factory and perhaps find out how it works and pose questions to them directly. And secondly, I think our new economic development agencies have to have eyes on this particular thing as well. We fund them for big money. They've got to take a look at this. They should be asking the questions that this Finance Committee is asking as well. And as Mrs. Reardon's mother says, no excuses. We want some answers. And, put them in charge of, they've got a duty to find out why the real estate board says of the last month, record prices increased in the city of St. John 7%, and residential tax base as of June 1 perhaps goes up 0.7%. Again, I echo what Councillor Sullivan and the Mayor says, and Councillor Reardon. It's frustrating. It's hellishly frustrating. So, perhaps we could explore Service New Brunswick coming in and making a presentation to Council. Mayor Darling, you have something to add?
Sorry, I guess, thanks for, and I apologize everyone for, we're in this together as a region. And I think here's the good news. If I try to spin it around, we've transitioned from begging for tax reform. We now have that absolute commitment from our premier. He has his majority government. We have a new minister of local government and governance reform, and now we're talking about when. We're not talking about that can we please? That commitment that's done. That is solid. We're now talking about getting it over the finish line, because the greater region of St. John has the potential to go to a whole new level of growth and prosperity. And so we're connected at the hip. And now we just need our local ministers and MLAs and our premier to get it done. And we're there to work with them hand in hand. But you're right. I think we've got lots of questions. So thanks for one more comment.
All right. If there's nothing further, and appreciate the presentation, Commissioner Fudge, then let's have a receive and file on this as well. And so moved by the mayor and seconded by Councillor Reardon's mother. All those in favor? And opposed? Thank you kindly. Last one, and again, committee, I apologize. I get a hard copy, and I had them reversed. But so we'll go to Mr. Fogan for 3.4 risk management, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and to the committee as well. And no, it's okay. I love this stuff. Maybe everybody else does. You were anxious to get there. It's all good.
All right.
I'll see if I can share my screen here.
Please. I'll see where just thinking while you're bringing that up, Mr. Fogan. You know, the other side of the coin is with this assessment thing. It tells me that it's cheaper to live in the city of St. John than all of those outlying areas. It's cheaper to live here, regardless of what our tax rate says. You know, there's the other side of the coin. I'm trying to think of glass half full something. It is cheaper to live here if you're talking about real estate. Anyway, go ahead, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So I'm just going to take you a little bit through a short presentation in regards to our update on our insurance procurement for 2021. Just want to provide a little bit of history before I get into what we're doing this year. Back in 2014, the city adopted a risk management policy and approach to insurance. And what we were seeing at the time were premiums and cost increasing at an unsustainable rate. So in 2015, for example, our cost of risk, which is what we calculate as our total insurance premiums, our total cost of all our claims, so all our deductibles, everything that's paid by the city, plus all the related department costs for running the program. In 2015, that reached a peak cost of $1.9 million. So in that year, we redesigned the program and we went out to an RFP at the end of 2015 to start our 2016 year a little differently. And as a result, the 2016 procurement of insurance came in at about $560,000 cheaper, and our total cost of risk was actually about $500,000. The difference being is we assumed some risk, so we assumed a little bit of risk when it came to deductibles and some of those internal costs. But the total savings were about $500,000 all combined. Okay. Sorry, I'm trying to get the slide to move. There we go. So the second part of this is in this year, we're looking at a total projected cost of about $1.4 million. We still have a couple months left of 2020, but that's what we're projecting. So we're still well below the 1.9 million peak that we saw in 2015. But as time goes on, inflation, things start to increase as well. And our total accumulated savings, I guess, since that program changed, is about $2.8 million over those 5 years. So certainly, I'm not sure if I think it was in council. I believe it may have been the deputy mayor at the time when we made this recommendation, asked me if how sure I was on this and why we should go this way, and if I was sure it was going to save money. I think my response at the time was, yeah, I do think it should. And she said, well, if it doesn't, who should we hold accountable? I said, well, that should be me. If I'm the one making the recommendation, it's not true. You should hold me accountable. 5 years later, I can report that it turned out well for our benefit. So given this year, I just want to reiterate what's happening right now in the insurance market. We're in what's called a hard market. We've not seen an insurance hard market since 2001. So it's been quite a long time. What that means is that there's more demand for insurance than there is available. And if you look at simple market supply demand curves, what that does is drive up costs. So why is there more demand and what's available? Well, there's been a lot of capital withdrawal from the market. In fact, some investors in Lloyd syndicates, they're actually exiting the business completely. So there's less number of people who are deploying capital into the market. Less people want to have that capital at risk for insurance. And so it's putting a lot of pressure on the insurance market globally. What's really at risk is new business. A lot of syndicates are not taking on new business. A lot of insurance companies are not taking on new business, and they're just being declined. So it's risky to go out and try to, if you're canceling a policy, try to go out and find one elsewhere. In the commercial business, maybe not in homeowners or personal lines, but in commercial, it can be risky right now. Also, we're seeing underwriting taking a lot longer to evaluate risks. We saw it on the Safe Clean Drinking Water project, their insurance renewal. Normally, it's done a couple months before the renewal. They were less than a few days before renewal in order to secure terms. We're also seeing a lot of risk being a lot more closely examined, and including like some insurers are not willing to assume all the exposure. So as an example, AIG, which is one of North America's largest insurance company, is only willing to take on a 40% exposure on property risks now. So that's a dramatic change from one of the world's largest insurer. So it is putting a lot of pressure on the market. So we are up for that 5-year normal check-in with the market where we do an RFP. So normally we would go to the market every year, or this year for 2021. But we're recommending at this time that we renew with our current insurer for at least 1 year. There is an allowance under that, under the procurement policy, which I'll show you the wording of that in a moment. From our analysis right now, we haven't secured terms yet, but this is what we're likely seeing. We're likely seeing that our liability premiums are going to have a very moderate increase, the standard 2-3%. Our risks actually have been very good on that. We are a good risk for our insurance company. We do retain a lot of our risks as well through a self-insured retention. So we are a good risk. I don't expect that would be really an issue. Our auto rates, those are regulated by the Energy and Utilities Board, so it is what it is. If the insurance companies ask for whatever percent they're going to get it, we're going to pay it. The property premium is where we're seeing a lot of the stress. We have seen other municipalities in Ontario and in other parts of the country that they're receiving quite significant increases. Like I said, we are seeing AIG withdraw from the market. We're seeing one of the other insurance companies that municipalities used to dealing with that they've completely withdrawn from the municipal market. But we did have some recent losses in the last couple of years with our flood risks. One thing I can say is we have completely, I shouldn't say completely, nothing's ever complete, but we have done a lot of risk mitigation with our flood risks. We're all aware of Dominion Park and the work we've done there, along with some of our pump stations and lift stations. We've really mitigated our risk, and we've taken some of that on ourselves. So we think we've got a good handle on that, but we did have some losses with flooding in recent years. But we still expect that we'll probably end up with a 30-40% increase. If we did go to market, one of the reasons why we're recommending that we don't go out, that we just renew for this year, is we could be declined coverage. We could be considered new business to other insurance companies. And there is limited capacity. A lot of these insurance companies, they have a bucket for new business and a bucket for renewals. It's easier for us to get a renewal than it is to try to get into the new business bucket. And also you'll see stricter underwriting under the new business bucket. So if we don't renew with our current insurer, any other insurance company is going to go through quite a review before they are willing to take on some of our risks. And what they could do is they could make it conditional. They could say, yes, we will insure your property, let's say, but make it conditional on a lot of infrastructure spending. And as you know, we do have a significant infrastructure deficit on some of our buildings and facilities. So it's also uncertain when we would have those terms. So, we have our timing of our council meetings in December. If we don't have terms in time, it could cause us that we have to extend our term with the current insurer, which would be a higher premium. And then we'd have to adjust afterwards. It's easier if we have certain terms prior, at least to the last meeting of council in December. I would like to say that I think our best case scenario is likely we're going to have the same best case scenario of going out to market would be same premium or similar to renewing with our current insurer. That I don't think we're going to get better terms. Best case scenario if we went out would be similar. But the worst case is risky. The worst case, we could be much more expensive, and we could have a refusal to cover certain exposures, which we do now. We're not recommending that we stick with our current insurer for a long period of time. I think a 1-year extension is all that's warranted at this point in time, and we reassess then. We'll see if the market has come out of the COVID impacts. If there's capital, which a lot of it was withdrawn from the market because they don't want to put their capital at risk due to COVID exposures. If it has returned, if there's a different market this time next year, then we'll be back recommending we go to RFP and look at the market. So the final slide I just want to show is in our procurement policy, it does allow for situations like this. There's a non-competitive purchases clause, in which case it could be waived under the authority of the city manager or common council in replacement with negotiations. And under that, it's where special circumstances exist. We've reviewed this policy with our procurement specialist, and we do believe this is a special circumstance, and that our sole sourcing could be done this year in line with this policy. So with that, because the city manager has authority, we don't have to ask for permission to do this. We're just recommending that committee receive and file this report. We just wanted to give this update so that the committee and the public would know which way we're proceeding. I'll stop sharing.
All right, thank you, Mr. Fogan. Good update. I don't know, any questions or concerns on this? I think, Councillor Reardon, I see your hand, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Now, Ian, when you started this presentation, did I hear you say that you love this stuff?
Well, it is my job, so I do have to say that. But no, I do enjoy it. I know it is a little dry, but I do enjoy the risk management. One of the reasons why I came to the city was to focus on the risk management and the preventative, and I saw the program we had and what we could do. So yeah, I do enjoy it.
Well, that sounds good, because I think buying insurance for most people gives them anxiety, because you've got a deductible. You don't want to have too big of a deductible, so you're trying to balance that. Do you have enough insurance? Are you buying too much insurance? It's very tricky. But if a person tells me they love that, what they're doing, and enjoy it, then I would be comfortable going with what you're recommending. And I understand that the city manager has the authority there, but I'm very happy with the report. I think it's a very reasonable thing to do based on my limited knowledge of buying insurance. Thank you.
Thanks, Donna. Any others? Anything else? Mayor Darling, please.
Just very quickly.
Go ahead.
Been a long night, I know, for everyone, but just Ian, thanks for the report. And I think it shows you get, again, your finger on the pulse of what's going on, how complex the world is right now. But I guess I'd be interested as we move on. I'm assuming that everything you're doing, just like every other senior leader here, is through the lens of continuous improvement, lowering risk, lowering the number of vehicles we have a premium on, lowering the number of buildings we have a premium on. So I just, anyway, thanks. It gives me a lot of confidence on behalf of citizens that you've got your finger on the pulse here. But that CI piece was where my brain was going. How do we, not only try to achieve sort of the same premiums or some savings, but be thinking about, do we need all these, whatever it is. I know the work that Ms. Rackley Roach is leading. How many phones do we need? How many cars do we need? It's just part of what is going on by all of our senior leaders on behalf of citizens all the time within the organization. Tonight just happened to be insurance discussion, but thank you for your presentation.
Thank you.
All right. With that, I'll ask for receive and file. Moved by the mayor and seconded by Councillor Casey. All those in favor? And opposed? Thank you, everyone. Like the mayor said, it is a very complex world of late, and I'm awfully glad we have our staff that we have working the way they have to bring the city forward, and they certainly do that every day in my humble opinion. So with that, good evening. I'll call for an adjournment. Good night, folks.